Welcome back. In our previous lectures, we discussed questions pertaining to metaphysics and epistemology. We dealt with metaphysics when we considered questions like whether God exists and whether God's existence can be known through reason alone. We dealt with epistemology when we raised questions concerning what knowledge is, how we know what we know, and whether we can be certain of anything. We also learned that there are three components that make up one's worldview. One's worldview is determined by what they think regarding metaphysics, epistemology, and ethics. Since we looked at metaphysics and epistemology in more detail, it is only appropriate to formally introduce what ethics is. Once we finally grasp what ethics is and the key elements concerning it, we will have examined every component of a worldview. Now, it is worth stressing the fact that worldviews are personal. They are how we see the world. This means that the goal of these lectures is not merely to share information. Impersonal things like Google or AI could do that. Rather, the goal is self-transformation. A clearer picture of a worldview brings about clearer self-knowledge. And so, keeping our goal in mind then, we will look at what ethics is and the different branches of it. When we consider ethics, we consider questions about what the good life is, what is better and worse, and whether there is any objective right or wrong that we can account for. To put it in the form of a definition, we can say that ethics is rational reflection on human conduct with the aim of directing that conduct in appropriate ways. Now, there are many components to this definition, so it's worth breaking down each part in order to better understand what we mean by ethics. First, ethics concerns itself with rational reflection. It is a kind of stepping back from ethical problems. It is not a kind of preaching about ethics, but it is about reasoning regarding right and wrong, regarding ethics. We see this most clearly in the person of Socrates. In ancient Athens, Socrates asked the Athenians to take a step back from their daily lives and ethical commitments in order to consider how their ethical views are justified. For example, we all want justice. When we see injustices, we are rightly appalled. But what is justice, and how is it different from injustice? Is justice determined by a community of people, a religion, reason? Is there even one justice, or are there many justices? Notice that in asking these questions, we are taking a step back from daily practical life in order to philosophize. We are no longer asking questions concerned with mere life, but we are asking questions concerned with the good life. For after all, what good is life if it is not the good life? Now, ethics is also concerned with human conduct. We are not interested in computer ethics or animal ethics in the sense of asking whether computers or animals can be moral. But that said, we are concerned with the right use or misuse of computers, animals, and the like. The third key element in ethics is that it is practical. It's true that we reason about ethical foundations and situations in ethics, but just arguing about these things isn't ethics. Ethics is something lived out. Because it is lived out, it again requires something personal of us. In fact, everyone already lives out an ethical code, whether we know it or not. Since we are human beings, animals capable of rationalizing, we should be conscious of the ethical code we live out in order to know whether or not we are living the way we should, whether we are living the good life. So the question in ethics is not merely what makes a good life, but rather, am I living that good life right now? Having looked at what ethics is, along with the consequences of its definition, we will take a look at some of the different branches of ethics in order to have a roadmap of its intricate parts. There are three branches in ethics that will concern us. There are more than these three, but these three are what we will focus on for our purposes. They are descriptive ethics, meta-ethics, and normative ethics. Descriptive ethics considers ethics historically and culturally. It asks, what are the ethical views of a given population at a given time? For example, if we want to know the ethical views that the ancient Greeks held concerning courage, we would be doing descriptive ethics. If we wanted to survey the ethical views that Americans have in our own day and age, that is, again, descriptive ethics. So descriptive ethics considers ethical views historically and culturally. It doesn't assess whether the ethical views held by a culture are right or wrong. It merely describes the ethical views, and is hence called descriptive ethics. Then there is meta-ethics. Meta-ethics is the most abstract and reflective branch. It asks the most foundational questions concerning ethics. For example, are ethical views either true or false? Or is there a difference between something being true or false and something being right or wrong? Or again, is moral thought and talk relativistic? Is justice something different for each and every person rather than something that is actually objective and true for everyone? Or again, does moral reasoning aim at truth? Or is morality grounded in something like emotion, so that when we are dealing with morals, we are really expressing our emotions rationally through ethics? Now, when it comes to meta-ethics, there are two major camps: objectivism and subjectivism. Those who hold to a form of objectivism claim that there really is such a thing as moral truth. People who view morality as objective might disagree about why moral truths are objective. For example, some might say science proves morality, or that morality is true for everyone because God reveals the right way of life to us. But even though those who hold morality to be objective disagree about why morality is objective, they can at least agree that morality is objective. Subjectivists, on the other hand, hold that morals are ultimately not true or false for everyone. In this view, morals are either founded upon society, so in this case something is right or wrong based on the society, or morality is really an expression of the way we live. Morals, in this view, have nothing to do with what is right or wrong in an objective sense, but only with what is right or wrong for me personally, or for you personally. And so, in short, meta-ethics is the most abstract branch of ethics. It seeks the foundation for ethics through inquiry and questioning. Finally, there is what we call normative ethics. Normative ethics seeks to find a set of concrete individual moral norms that can guide our lives. Even though it is still theoretical, it gives us practical advice. There are three kinds of normative views: archaic, deontological, and consequential. Archaic normative ethics concerns itself with the pursuit of virtue and the avoidance of vice. Virtue is simply a good habit, while vice is a bad habit. And so in this view, to be a good person means to have good habits and to avoid bad ones. But how do we get good habits and avoid bad habits? We attain good habits by doing good actions, and we avoid bad habits by avoiding bad actions. Since the archaic view concerns itself with habits, and habits form our character, the archaic view is really concerned with human character. Now, this view may seem commonsensical at first, but notice the way we speak about morality in our own day. When we speak of morality, we tend to describe different values. Values are things we will or desire. For example, I value honesty and justice. But values are separate from character. it is at least possible to value honesty and justice without being an honest and just person. So values are separate from character. A person can have good values but have a bad character. But no person could have good habits and have a bad character. Habits form our character, while values do not. Now, of course, this is not to say that the Arataic view is true. It could be that ethics concerns itself with values, not virtue. But this difference is at least worth noting. There is also the deontological view. Deontological ethics concerns itself with rules and obligations. For example, treat others the way you want to be treated seems to be an ethical rule. One can form a whole ethical system through deontological ethics. For example, let's say I wonder whether or not I should steal bread because my family is hungry and I cannot afford the groceries for them. Is it right for me to steal it? Well, working off the rule, treat others the way you want to be treated, what would make the most sense? How would I like to be treated if I were a store owner and someone else was going to steal bread? Well, if I knew their situation, I would probably let them, depending on how many times they had taken bread before and whether they are actively trying to work or whether they were even in a position to work in the first place. But regardless, I would probably let them, though I would definitely want to know that they were taking the bread so that I was aware of what was happening in my own store. I would not want this to happen without me noticing. And so since I would want someone in that situation to at least ask me for the bread, the right move for me would be to at least ask the grocery clerk or store owner if I could take the bread. If they say yes, great. And if they say no, then I would have to go to a different grocery store until someone allowed me to take the bread. So that's deontological ethics in a nutshell. You begin with a rule or a set of rules, and you apply that rule to your own concrete situation to see whether the action is right or wrong. Finally, there is what we may call consequentialism. Consequentialism is concerned with the consequence of the action. If the action brings about a good end, then the action is good. If the action brings about a bad end, then the action is bad. For example, what would the consequence be for stealing food from a grocery store in order to feed my hungry family? Well, my hungry family members could eat, and that's good. But the store would lose money. Can the store afford to lose, say, $3? Probably. They most likely wouldn't even notice the impact. Of course, by law, it is illegal to steal. So again, I should at least ask the grocery clerk for permission so that I could avoid getting into trouble with the law. Doing this promotes the greatest good for the greatest number of people, in this case, my family, while minimizing any harm. In this case, the grocery store could afford the financial loss of $3. So far then, we've seen a survey of different ethical theories, but we haven't really put these theories into conversation with one another. And even more importantly, we will need to put these theories into conversation with our own lives, since after all, ethics is something to be lived out and not merely discussed. And so in our next lesson, we will explore both deontological ethics and consequentialism in more detail. We will set aside Arataic ethics momentarily, mostly because it lost popularity during the Enlightenment and post-Enlightenment period. Now that said, there is a consequence to setting Arataic ethics aside, and this will become clear when we see the difficulties that arise after considering deontological ethics and consequentialism. So I hope this was helpful. Thank you.